So the French ambassador was asked to leave Niger. I believe it was back in August, or it may have been a couple of months ago. And now the ambassador is finally leaving, and there are plans for the military to also be taken out. Statements from Macron is that the military will also leave Niger by the end of this year. And during this process of President Bazoum being ousted, the French government had no respect for the military who took over the country. And in their eyes, they thought that the military had no authority to tell them to leave. That only President Bazoum had the authority to tell them to leave. And now, because of their lack of support from other people around the world, they find themselves in a position where they don't have the necessary power to continue to stay in the country. And I want to read a quote that was said by a French lawyer and leader of the National Rally Party, Marie Le Pen, who said that it's sad because the way it goes makes an impression as if we're being kicked out of Africa. But there was no other choice. We are recalling our ambassador and withdrawing our troops on humiliating terms. It's a serious failure for French diplomacy. So, this quote in itself really shows that Europeans are consciously aware of what strength and power looks like. And they're also consciously aware of what defeat looks like. And they never want to showcase defeat because they know that it shows weakness to the rest of the world. Baba Marco, I know that you've been studying this and following this as well. And I asked a question: where do you think the French go from here? What do you think their next play will be?
Oh, BB48, brother. I appreciate the question. Yeah, I think, I made a statement. I said that imperialists never just give up hegemony. Without unless they have been thoroughly neutralized or defeated, as the French were, and as the United States was in Vietnam. They don't do that. So if they pull back strategically after essentially painting themselves into a corner, because the reality is that without the support of the United States, and with their inability to coax or bribe one of their neo-colonial puppets in West Africa to engage in a military operation against Niger, they were in a bind. So Emmanuel Macron, he could talk all of the smack he wanted to. Fact of the matter is, France alone they knew that they couldn't pull off an operation to return Bazoum to power without it having further consequences in other parts of Africa. So I think that their move now will be to try to influence the destabilization and and increase the terrorism that has been plaguing the Sahel since the overthrow and assassination of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. I think they will simply find covert ways to fund and finance the various jihadist movements, such as the Islamic State Sahel province, which is operating in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, and the Islamic State West Africa province, which is operating in Nigeria, northeastern Nigeria, Cameroon, and Chad. So I think that's their next move, because they weren't thoroughly neutralized. It was a strategic move. Sometimes during combat, forces pull back. Intelligent forces will realize that they are in an untenable position, and France certainly was in a politically untenable position. So they will pull back their forces, rather than sacrificing or taking a loss. That is, most intelligent military, strategic military thinkers, unlike, say, Hitler in Stalingrad, or Zelensky in Bakhmut. Most of them will live to fight another day, and that's the move that I think. And we see that as France has pulled out of Mali, and Burkina Faso, we have seen increased terrorist activities. Right now, as a matter of fact, an Al-Qaeda affiliate in Mali has cut off the historic Timbuktu from the rest of the country. They put a blockade around Timbuktu. And so, the Mali military is in a situation where they have their own citizens trapped inside of Timbuktu, but they need to do something to try to move them out. And without drones and these precision bombers and those kinds of things, it becomes very difficult, particularly when the terrorists are using human beings as shields to save themselves. So I expect to see increased terrorist activities as a result of this decision by France to immediately pull its ambassador out and promise, once again, here we go, all of these treaties that we've seen broken, Neville waving that little piece of paper. I got Hitler's signature. Yeah, right. So they have a promise that the troops, the 1,500 troops that they have, will be removed within by the end of the year. So that's what I expect.
It's interesting that Macron made a statement saying that the 1,000 or 1,500 troops that are stationed there, because of the coup that took place, they're no longer interested in fighting terrorism in West Africa. And we've always known that the French, the United States, those countries are the people responsible for bringing terrorism to the African continent. And when I'm looking at this article that you sent in dealing with the Islamic State Sahelian affiliate and talking about how the Sahel region has this influx of what they call these jihadists. And this is something that you talk about a lot when we talk about the history of Muammar Gaddafi and what happened going back to 2011 and how all of it stemmed from that overthrow of Libya and the destabilization of that region. And then we get these countries saying now we're coming in fighting this terrorism problem that never was an issue in Africa prior to that. But now we see this prevalent because of their introduction of it.
Well, first of all, we have to understand and see they never draw the connection to the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi. That's just something like is taboo, something that that they absolutely can't discuss. But quite frankly, what has happened as a result of this what Dr. Cynthia McKinney called the war of aggression or the illegal war on Libya. They knew that they didn't have the forces on the ground. Okay, so once they made the decision, Barack Obama, Sarkozy of France, Cameron of the United Kingdom, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, all of these people who literally are addicted to war. Once they got the United Nations to pass a resolution, a no-fly zone, which Russia and China failed to veto, unfortunately. They had to have someone to actually do the fighting on the ground, because I don't care how much you bombard somebody or whatever, what kind of air forces you have, drones, cruise missiles, or whatever. At some point, you have to fight on the ground, and that they hadn't cultivated those kind of forces. It wasn't possible for them to cultivate those kind of forces inside of Libya, so they had to bring in fighters from outside. And this just goes to show you the extent to which these people will go in order to achieve an objective. They brought in people into Libya who had been fighting and killing Americans in Afghanistan and in Iraq and in Syria. They brought them into Libya to be their ground force, to be their infantry. Actually, they were provided, of course, with a lot of vehicles from Qatar and other places like that. We'll be putting up a chart a little bit later that shows how many people were involved, how many countries were involved in this war on this tiny country with about 5 million people. It's not a tiny country, but it's just, not heavily populated. It doesn't have, the kind of modern warfare systems that, say, like the United States has been supplying to Ukraine, right? HIMARS and M777s, et cetera, et cetera. They brought them in to be the ground force, which then allowed all of the NATO countries that were involved, in this war to be the Air Force. Okay. And after the Muammar Gaddafi was assassinated, all of these jihadists that had been brought into Libya intended to make Libya, as an Islamic state. But there were so many different factions, they were not able to do that. They are still there, but they were not able. They were hoping to actually just take the whole country and make it, part of the Islamic State. And so what these jihadists then began to do was to spread out of Libya into other areas that they considered to be more vulnerable. And so there were already some activities there. I think Al Qaeda in the Maghreb and some other organizations were already there. Boko Haram in northeastern Nigeria was already there. But once they got their hands on all of these weapons that they captured from the defeated Libyan army, they began to, give these weapons to various organizations or groups who may have had some type of grievances with their governments. And then that's what started the spread of the terrorism into the Sahel. The NATO powers, or the tribes of the North Atlantic, particularly France, responded by attempting to help their neo-colonial governments, which were in place in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Niger. They said that they sent French troops in to fight these jihadists. But there was a very interesting speech, which we'll get posted, on our Facebook page, by the Minister of State from Burkina Faso, Minister Bazi, and he was saying that there were over 10,000 Western troops in the Sahel. And he said, with all of the technology they have, all of the drones, the United States has a drone base that was built by Barack Obama in Agadez. That's in the northern part of Niger. Actually, it's the place where a lot of people, a lot of Africans leaving their countries because of the conditions, they leave Agadez to try to travel across Libya to reach the Mediterranean, where unfortunately a lot of them drown if they don't get thrown into slavery in in the Libya that's run by these jihadists. They have all of this technology, drones, all of these military personnel, but the terrorism is spreading. As a matter of fact, more people have died in the Sahel region of Africa as a result of terrorism than in any other region of the world in the last 2 years. More Africans have died. And so when people think about terrorism, they think about all of the bombings in places like, Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria. More Africans have died than any other group of people as a result of the spread of terrorism. So what are all of these troops doing? And in the brilliant speech, and really it is one of the most brilliant speeches that has been given in the UN, since the days of Robert Mugabe. He said that they're there to protect the resources that they are extracting from the earth.
That's it.
They aren't there to protect the Africans.
And I think a clear indicator of that is how quickly we saw ISIS neutralized during the Trump administration by Vladimir Putin in Syria.
Mm-hmm.
ISIS was running rampant during the Obama administration. And here you have, within the first few years of Trump being in office and him working with Vladimir Putin, they were able to neutralize ISIS quick because there were actually real efforts behind making that happen.
Right.
So we know that it's not hard to neutralize a terrorist organization, even though we know ISIS is another created terrorist organization by these imperialists, which is why they were able to last as long as they did.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have somebody who comes in and steps in and says, we're going to actually really fight it, then it's harder for them to maintain any type of existence.
Very definitely. And, they have much more of a base of support, in countries, like Syria and Iraq, for example, than they would have in these African countries in the Sahel, even though, many Africans have, converted to this, extremist form of religion. We're not condemning the entire religion, obviously, because it does, everybody's not involved in this, but you do have some extremists, just like you have extremists, right here in the United States. They blew up the 16th Street Baptist Church, for example. So, these are things that happen, but to the point, had that been the objective, with all of this technology, and you really see how this intelligence works if you look at some of the alternative sources of information on the war in Ukraine. The United States is providing intelligence. They had an agreement to use Starlink. I think this system that is owned by Elon Musk. He gave the Pentagon authority to use that, and as a matter of fact, they want to investigate him because during one particular operation that they were planning to attack inside of Russia, he wouldn't allow them to use it. This is a whole different story. But what the point I'm trying to make is that they're able to pinpoint, for example, look, that they tried to kill, for example, the other day in Crimea, one day last week, they tried to kill the Russian general, the Russian admiral, I'm sorry, who's in charge of Russia's Black Sea fleet, which is based in Sevastopol, a very famous site from World War II. And they knew that he was in, they believed that he was in this particular location as a result of the intelligence that they got from the U.S., either from satellites or from drones, and they were able to launch an attack. And Crimea is part of Russia. Crimea was always part of Russia until it, Khrushchev decided to give that part of it away to Ukraine, but uh, they didn't succeed. But that just goes to show you how they can pinpoint locations. A
Mm-hmm.
number of Russian officers have been killed as a result of the intelligence, the technology, the real-time technology that the United States primarily and NATO are supplying to Ukraine. So that's pinpointing information against a major military force. Now, with all of these different jihadist groups, you're not talking about major military forces. So had it been their objective, they could have easily, in my opinion, not not completely wipe them out, but they could at least neutralize them to a certain extent, to where they aren't causing the kind of damage that they are causing, on African people in these countries, almost on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
So that's to your point of what if they were really committed, particularly when they have, right, a $100 million drone base located right there in Niger. What's the excuse?
Right. They don't waste any time drone striking anybody else that they want to eliminate. But in this situation, uh, there's very, very slow progress, and it's by intent. And similarly to the troops that have been sent into the Congo, as we've discussed, by countries like Kenya and Uganda, they're not sending those troops there to actually assist with the problem. They're sending those troops there to safeguard their access to those resources,
Exactly.
or control those resources for some Western imperialists. But I don't want to forget this chart, because looking at this, when I think back about the situation, and I'm glad you brought this to our attention. When I think back about Libya, and we were often familiar with the United States and France and the UK and what they did, the roles that they played. But here you have all of these other countries as well that when you look at this, you say, this was a collective effort by these countries to try to, uh, it was a coalition, as it says here, to try to overthrow Muammar Gaddafi. Um, and we can see, from personnel to aircraft to ships, cruise missiles, and other sorties that were flown, the amount of contributions that were given by each country.
Yeah, it's when you stop and think about the NATO charter, which has a provision in it that says if one NATO country is attacked, then all countries have to come to the defense of that country. And here you have every country in NATO. I don't think, with the exception of Germany, I don't believe Germany was on that list, but all of these NATO countries were involved in this war against, this country. And you can see from the chart, obviously Barack Obama and the United States, was the big dog in the fight. I mean, they fired 228 cruise missiles. Go back up to the top, almost.
Even when I look down here, Qatar is not even in NATO.
Qatar, Jordan is not in NATO. The United Arab Emirates
It's not
is
in
not
NATO.
in NATO. Qatar,
Mhm.
not in NATO. But all of these countries contributed to the war on Muammar Gaddafi and the Libyan Jamahiriya. And so, I mean, it was like, even Sweden, which I don't think was even in NATO at the time. I think Sweden just got in NATO. So, I mean, it was incredible. But the reason why I wanted to look at that chart, wanted to show you that chart, and show our public that chart, many the people who have not seen it, um, it relates what is going on, on the African continent, in these countries where progressive military forces have, risen up and seized control of the reins of government, because the governments that were in power were essentially neo-colonial puppets of France, and they weren't doing anything to protect their citizens. And there were a number of soldiers that were being killed. As a matter of fact, we just talked about it. See, suspected jihadis in Burkina Faso have killed 16 civilians, including 4 army people. And so a lot of times when these attacks taking place, not only they're killing civilians, but they're killing people in the military. So the military said, we can't continue to allow this to take place.
Mm-hmm.
The military in Mali, the military in Burkina Faso, the military in Niger, we can't allow this to take place. So they rose up and said, we got to do something different. We have to do something different. Now, the troops that have been stationed there from the various countries, Italy has troops there, right? So they, in addition to the United States, France, the United Kingdom, they said, no, we have to do something different. But by ignoring the reason for the attacks, these actions, by these military forces fit into what's known as blowback. So what we have seen in these 3 countries, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, what we have seen is a classic case of blowback. So let me just read this. This comes from the late Chalmers Johnson. Blowback is a CIA term first used in March 1954 in a declassified report on the 1953 operation to overthrow the government of Mohammed Mossadegh in Iran. It is a metaphor for the unintended consequences of the U.S. government's international activities that have been kept secret from the American people. Okay, so in the case of France, it wasn't so much that they were keeping things secret, from their country, from the people, the citizens of their country, when they were sending troops, into Mali and Burkina Faso and Niger. But the fact of the matter that the troops were there and the terrorism was increasing, and they rose up. They saw France as directly being responsible for much of what was taking place, and they threw them out. So this fits into the category of blowback, but it also fits into the category of blowback from the extent that France was a major participant. Okay, so the 3 big dogs in the fight, as you can see from the chart, were the United States, with 8,500 personnel, the United Kingdom with 1,300 personnel, France with 800 personnel, right? And you can see the number of aircraft that were used, the number of sorties flown over the country, looking, for places to attack or attacking people and whatnot. And so France is also blowback because of France's participation in destabilizing what was in fact, per all of the indicators, the most developed and in terms of standard of living, high standard of living of any country in Africa. But not only that, Libya provided stability. Once Gaddafi decided to cut out all of these kind of, these forays into places like Chad and that kind of got his head kind of straightened out to realize, particularly when the Arab world laughed at him, he turned more towards Africa. So what happened is that the blowback is also as a result of France's participation in creating the chaos that we see today in Libya, the chaos which is then spread, into the Sahel. So these are these actions against France would fit into that category of unintended consequences. You kill Gaddafi, and now you being kicked out of Niger. I mean, you could make that situation. You've been kicked out of Burkina Faso. You've been kicked out of Mali all at the same time. But of course, we know that there's a lot of backdoor screaming, backyard or backdoor or secret scheming that's going on that will try to make these countries, quite frankly, into another Libya if they can. So that's that's my take on it. So the thing of it is that the African people, have to remain steadfast. We see that our brother Kemi Seba just arrived in Niger yesterday or day before yesterday, and so he's there to help rally people, give some speeches and organize. So we just got to remain steadfast. But whereas I think a lot of people see this is why everything that you do has to be balanced. You have to think critically. It's okay to rejoice. To say, okay, we kick France out, but it's no time to take your foot off the gas. There's no time for you not to remain steadfast. As a matter of fact, Burkina Faso has a people's militia. Okay, in addition to their army. So I think that it would behoove the government, these other governments, to also do the same thing. To the extent that they can trust people. I mean, it certainly worked in Cuba to help repel the Bay of Pigs invasion when Portugal invaded Guinea in 1970 in an attempt to kill Amilcar Cabral and Sekou Touré and probably Kwame Nkrumah, because Kwame Nkrumah was living in Conakry when he was overthrown in Ghana. Sekou Touré made him the co-president of Guinea. Portugal invaded. They had some collaborators on the ground, and the Guinea military responded, and then the People's Militia reported to their stations, got their AK-47s, joined the fight, drove the Portuguese back into the sea, captured many of the race traders and hung them from bridges, and left them hanging there for days, as to send a message to other people. If you're gonna invade our country and try to kill our leaders, this is what's going to happen to you. Okay, so those are two great examples: Dr. Fidel Castro Ruz in Cuba, Ahmed Sekou Touré in Guinea. People's Militia, train, right? I mean, just like having these National Guard people go to training, every so many months they have to go train. They do that, that's what was being done in Cuba, in Guinea, and it worked. And given what's most likely to happen, even though, the force you're fighting is not necessarily an invading army, like the Bay of Pigs or like the Portuguese tried when they invaded Guinea, Conakry, in 1970. So I think it would behoove them. The other thing that I think they should do, they have formed the military alliance. I think they should form themselves into a federated state. Right? I mean, they could have, like, the United States of the Sahel, for example, and each country could operate as a state the same way North Carolina and California and Texas and Missouri operate, but with a central government. I mean, this is how we have to move. Recreate the Mali Empire, recreate the Songhai Empire, because a lot of the isolated, it's just too easy for our enemies to just pick people off. I mean, just look at all of the coups, and you think about that. All of the coups that have taken place in West Africa, that France never objected. They didn't object when Modibo Keita was overthrown. So Modibo Keita was working. He was the president of Mali. He was working with Kwame Nkrumah. They had formed the Ghana, Guinea, Mali Union. Said they were going to set an example for the rest of Africa. Okay, this is how we can form a federated state. Okay, so after Kwame Nkrumah was overthrown by the CIA, Modibo Keita was overthrown in Mali, I think in 1968. France didn't have any objections when Blaise Compaoré and his the other race traitors overthrew and assassinated our brother Thomas Sankara. What did France say? What did France say about democracy or whatever? Nothing, right? Because they were putting their puppets in place to run these countries. So, this is how we have to operate if we really want to move towards liberation and empowerment. I keep saying it over and over and over again. We have to recreate the Narmer model. King Narmer, unified ancient Kemet. If that doesn't happen, do we have an African origin of civilization to even talk about? Perhaps, but we saw what happened as a result of it, right? 3,000 years of African people walking the earth as free, proud, productive, prosperous, and powerful people. We can do this again with the right mentality. And I can see some forces that are moving. And, hopefully somebody's listening, to what we're suggesting. And I'm just repeating what Cheikh Anta Diop said. He the one that wrote, the book. Do I have it over here? Black Africa. Yeah, got it right here. Okay. Title of this book is Black Africa, the Economic and Cultural Basis for a Federated State by the great Cheikh Anta Diop. Okay. This is the model. We can do this. It's like Garvey said, what African people have done, African people can do.
Shay. Well, brothers and sisters, if you like what you hear, definitely subscribe to our channel for more content. Share this video. Leave your comments down in the comment section. And give this video a thumbs up so it helps it out in the YouTube algorithm. Until next time, Bibi for Hodier.
Bibi for Hodier.